Okay, welcome back to Coding is for You. Tonight we're going to build on what I did yesterday in the last video, where we messed around with this text file, a simple text file. We read it, we brought it into an object, and then we wrote it out. Today I was looking at someone's code and I saw that they were using this tool called FileHelpers that helps us do what it did, and we don't have to do as much work. So I'm going to build on what we did yesterday and do that for you right now. And this is a tool I wish I had known about, and I don't know how old it is, but if you want to know how it works, FileHelpers.net, and if you go to the quick start, it kind of tells you how it works. So real quick, I'm going to zoom in so you can see it. You start out with some sample data in a text file, and it's comma separated, comma, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4 fields. And then using FileHelpers, you bring this in at the top, using directive, you add what's called an attribute above your class that you create. You create this class that, like we did yesterday, that describes your data, and notice that it has the same fields. Come on. Okay, customer has a customer ID, name, balance, and this field is not in, yes it is, it's in the address. So you have customer ID, you have a name, and you have a balance. That's probably like their bank balance. Then you have a date at the end, and then you create the class, and then the file helper will bring it all into your class for you. You don't have to write manual code like we did yesterday in my last video. Okay, so let's bring it in. So how do you bring this into your code? FileHelpers 3.3. Here's what you do. First of all, and this is a way you can bring in a lot of packages, by the way. You go to File, New Project. We're going to run a console application. Console application, if you don't know, is just a very basic console where you get the little black window. That's the console, and you can write out to it. So very often if we want to run a process or something, we'll write a console application, and it'll run. It doesn't really have an interface. It just runs and does some stuff. So mine is called Console Application 5, and unlike Visual Studio Code, it builds everything for you. You don't have to type that .NET new and restore and all that. Okay, so here is, I hope you can see this very well. Here is our class, main class. So right now I'm going to go ahead and get rid of everything except system, because we don't need that. And we have the namespace, like I said, that's not necessary unless you need to name things. So you don't need that. Let's tighten up the code and get as simple as possible. And we have these references here again. I don't really want to see those in a small program like this, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. I'm just going to, well, how about I show you how to get rid of it. Okay, so I just looked it up, and it says it's under Tools, Options, Text Editor, All Languages, Code Lens. Code Lens. Enable Code Lens. Nope. Alright, see? Now it makes it even simpler. And you can turn that on later if you need it. If you have lots of references, you probably do want to see those, right? But we don't, so we don't. Alright, so this is our main program. And what we need to do is we're going to bring in, what are we going to bring in? FileHelpers. And if you don't know, Visual Studio has this Nuget. Okay, so you have a package manager in Visual Studio called Nuget. And if you go to manage your packages, now it has a console where you can type your commands. We're going to go to the manage though. This shows you the ones that are installed, which we don't have any. And we're going to install this FileHelpers. So let's type in FileHelpers. It'll search, and then we're going to get this by Marcos Melli and contributors. All free, of course. Come over here to your console application and make sure it's included in your project, and then hit install. Successfully installed. So what that did was it added a reference up here. See that? That's a reference called FileHelpers. It added it, and it created something in this package file here. So packages are part of your things you install just like this, a NuGet package, and notice that it's got file helpers right here. But we didn't have to do anything or worry about it, it just did it. Alright, now back to our program. So how do you use this? First of all, let's take this website and create that file. I'm going to copy the data that they gave us. I'm going to paste it into Notepad, and I'm going to save it as input again. Okay? First of all, let's get rid of all the junk that we did in our last video just to be clean. Alright, so we saved it and we replaced it. Now under our C temp, let's make sure it's there. C temp input. There's our data. Alright, so that's like our data that we want to model. Okay? So that's there, good enough. Now we're going to create a class, just like we did in the last video, that describes our customer. Remember I said this is like a model. Our data has how many fields does it have? It's got one ID, it's got a name, first and last, it's got an amount, a balance, and it has a date. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Guess what? This is the model. This has 1, 2, 3, 4. And this also has an attribute over it, and I don't know what that means yet, so let's just not worry about it. Now, these little things in brackets above your functions and classes are called attributes. And the attributes do certain things based on what they are, and they change what happens within that class. And in this case, I don't even know anything about file helpers, but I can tell you what it's doing. It's telling it this is delimited by a comma. Okay, so it's very clear. Now, instead of typing it all out, let's copy this. And we need to add a reference in here, otherwise it won't be able to find it. So always have to add you add a reference to your project file over here, and you add a reference to your class here so we can access it. Okay? You have to do that in 2 places. Now I'm going to copy the entire class because that way we don't have to type it in. Let's come down here. Now we've got 2 classes. We've got the program class, which is our main running interface, and we have our customer class, and I like to tighten everything up nice and neat. I don't like spaces, they just bug me. Okay. Now we've got our customer class and we have that file, and instead of looping and loading manually, guess what? We've got our file helper here, which is going to help us do this very easily. Alright, so you're going to create what's called, they call an engine. You just have to kind of try and figure out what they're doing, you know. They're creating it, let's copy it in here, and then let's copy all their code in here. Very basic. Always use the getting started section, and it will basically just walk you through it. So what's happening? We're running this program, and it's starting here. And it's, first of all, you are declaring a file helper engine, and you are passing in your custom type. What's our custom type? It's the customer we created down here. Customer.customer ID, customer.name, customer.balance. We're telling the engine we're creating an object based off of our customer class. And I don't know anything about file helper, but I can just read this and kind of know what it's doing. The next thing we're going to do, I'm going to get rid of their comments because I just find them distracting. The next thing is we're going to read the file. So we don't have to worry about the guts of reading and writing. And remember, we did system.io. We don't have to do any of that. It just works for us. Deep within their code, it just works. That's what the cool thing about using an add-in is. So this one is reading the file, and we're getting a result. In here, I don't know why, but it's writing it out. And so remember, we need to find our path where our input file is. So string path equal to, remember the @ symbol, otherwise it won't like our backslashes. C:\temp, and then our file name was input.txt. Remember that? There it is right there. ctemp input. So it's going to read that into this result, and then it's going to write it out. I'm not sure why, but in their example that's what it does. But more importantly, down here, it's going to loop through our result all of those records, and just like last time, it's going to load this customer object into, guess what? Not a list of customers, but an array. Notice every time you see those little tiny brackets there, I wish I could point to it, but the mouse cursor's over it. Anytime you see these brackets here after something, that means it's an array. Let's load this up and get it running and see what it does. And we're very close to the end because this video isn't going to be very long. Path plus input. Okay? Now, once again, we can put breakpoints and hit run. Okay, now we're declaring path. Path variable is ctemp. Notice it doubles up on our backslashes in the actual value. Hover your mouse over the variable to see it. By the way, let me show you what else you can do in Visual Studio. This is very powerful. If you have a variable, let's say we want to watch this path variable as we're going through the code. You right click on the variable while it's running and you add a watch to it. So you're adding a watcher. So if it were to change, see it down here in this watch window? If it were to change through the code, you could sit there and watch it. That's why it's saying add watch. And we could do the same thing with engine. Let's add a watch. Now we've got engine under here, and notice that it's got a drop down. That means it's more complex. But we're not going to look at that yet. And then we could do the same thing with result. Why not? Let's just add a watch. Now if you don't want to do the watch window, you can double click on it and do a quick watch. If you want to just peer in there real quick watch will show you what's in path. So there's your path variable and there's the value of it. So everything is hidden. If you need to see it, you can look in your watch windows. Very powerful concept. You're going to need this very badly when you debug, okay, if you don't know about that. Or you can hover your mouse over it, which is pretty nice too. Alright, so the next line we're stuck at is the engine line, and this is just going to do some setup for us. And then it's going to read that result and notice how if this was your code, you could step into it and it would step, but it's not. It is compiled DLL, so you will not be able to step into this code. So normally if you hit F11, you wouldn't step over it, you could step into it and go and see what it's doing. But if I hit F11, it's not going to step into it because it's not our code. It's hidden in a DLL, and you cannot step through code that's in a DLL that we used. You're probably wondering, what's he talking about, DLL? Well, when we brought this in here as a reference, look up there where I have it highlighted. FileHelpers is a DLL. If you click the properties of that and move me out of the way, the properties of that, oh, I don't like how it does this. Notice FileHelpers right there, that's a DLL. It's bringing in one file that you're referencing as a DLL, and you cannot step in. It's compiled code. You can't step into it. That's why you might want to step in here and read the code, but you can't. It's already done. Okay? Alright, so now we're going to look at that. It's telling us if you need some metrics on how long things run, that's there. I've never even noticed that before, but let's write it out and see what happened. Okay, the problem is it wrote it out and I forgot to put my path, so I don't know where it went. It's in the project file or something. So let's stop this and run it all over again and put in our path. That way it goes under what? ctemp. We're going to run it. And we're going to drop back down again. Reads the file, writes the file. And guess what? It just popped in here, file out, right? File out because it said path plus file out. We're going to open it, and all it did was it wrote it out. So this helper is doing what we did in the last video, but just in one line. Just write it out, okay? And we had to loop through it to do that. Okay, that's all good and all. Well, you don't really need that line, but they're just showing you that it's there, and that's how you use it, right? Now, remember I said we put the result into an array, and I still haven't covered what an array is, but it is many values. It's one variable with many values in it, and to get into the array and use it, you have to tell it what number in the item array you're using. So this would be 0, this would be 1, this would be 2, and this would be 3 rows in this array, okay? And let's prove that. Our array is right here, and see it says 4 customers. I hope you can see that. It's very tiny. We're going to expand it and see there's 0 customer, 1, 2, 3, and that relates to these 4 records right here. And it did it all for us, and that's the value of this thing right here. You're probably wondering, why am I telling you this? It's because this helper is doing a bunch of stuff for us that we don't have to worry about, okay? So in our result, let's take a look at the first record, 0. Remember, arrays start at 0. They don't start at 1. It's a weird thing. You just got to get used to it. All right, so that his balance is 435, 1732, Juan Perez, right? And there he is right there. So he's loaded into an array, not a list, but an array. And then we can cycle through an array the same way we did through a list. For each customer in result, customer is a type. So this is saying there's many customers, 1 customer. For each 1 in result, it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Loop through this, F10, 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 F10. It's going to write everything out. And here you get you declared cust, and now you get cust.name, cust.date. Let's look at customer. You can add a watch right here. Watch this. So I added a watch and cust. Now watch this change as I loop through it down here. Watch this change. It's Juan Perez. We're watching the values down here. Pedro Gomez, Ramiro Politi, and see, we added a watch, and we can see these values, and we know what to do with it. Okay, so I've shown you the basics of what this can do, and this file helper probably does a lot more than that. But if you need to put objects into a class real quick and get things done, let's see what else it does real quick. Let's see, I honestly don't know. I just found that, and I know it's pretty cool because it saved us a lot of work. So let's see, what can the engine do? This is one way to find out. After read record, after write record, before read record. Now that's interesting. It has some events that are happening before and after events. Header text, options. Now the way to understand this is probably just to go to this website and search for it. But you could also do this. You could do, say, after read record. What does that do? What does after read record do? Well, it gives you a little description right there. Called in read operations just after record was created from a string. No idea how that works, but it's interesting to know why it's there. But it's kind of good idea through IntelliSense. What's header text do? Read header in the last read. The read header in the last read operation. I don't know. We gotta look it up. Anyway, I hope that little nugget helps you. I'm gonna try to do more videos, and I'm gonna start doing this series called Little Nuggets, and they're gonna be like little tiny C# tricks or tricks and tips, things you might not know about, things that are kind of hidden. They're kind of new features maybe. They're going to be very short videos. They're going to be called .NET Nuggets or C# Nuggets. This little tiny nuggets to put in your head. And anyway, thanks for joining.